Good evening. Welcome to Bedtime Stories. This reading is intended for mature audiences only. Will you go out to dinner with me? Vivian played those 8 words over and over in her head as if they were the words to her favorite song. When she thought about the beautiful smile that made little crinkle lines appear at the corners of Samad's eyes when she answered yes, she hugged herself, pretending that it was him. She only had 3 hours before he was scheduled to pick her up. There was much to do and not enough time to do it in. Her house was a damn mess. She couldn't think of anything sexy about a woman with a dirty house. In fact, she never thought she'd be one of them. But she didn't have time to clean it now. Since she and Christopher split up, all Vivian did was work, work, work. Between business, travel, and taking care of her daughter, her Rite Aid franchise, and Two Sisters Botanical, there wasn't much energy left to tidy up her house and do the laundry. Clothing was strewn all over, cosmetics left on her dresser bureau, and she had not made her bed in over a week. And there had to be at least a quarter inch of dust on her furniture. No time to worry about that now. She jumped in the shower, scrubbing her skin until it hurt and nearly scalded herself with the hot water. Next, she slathered lotion all over her body and threw on a t-shirt and a pair of beat-up old jeans. She slapped on a baseball cap and a pair of dark sunglasses and rushed out the door to Nellie's salon in the ironbound section of Newark. An hour and 20 minutes later, Vivian returned home, walking like someone had stuck a hot poker covered with wax up her ass. Despite the discomfort, her underarms, legs, and genitalia, and even the crack of her behind were as smooth as a baby's bottom and just as soft. So it was worth it. With every painful step she took, she swore she would never put off getting a Brazilian for this long again. Ouch. After a quick check of the time, she ran up to her bedroom, stripped, and reached for her Kama Sutra oil, massaging the central blend across the surface of her breast, giving special attention to her nipples. She poured a little extra on her fingers and spread the lips of her labia to insert the oil deep inside, making sure she covered the tender outer lips and between her butt cheeks, just in case she got lucky. When she was done, her skin glistened as if it had been polished. "What am I going to wear?" she lamented. She'd been thinking about that on her drive home and still hadn't decided. She hurried to her lingerie drawer, tossing bras and panties on the floor like a madwoman. She took a deep breath, forcing herself to calm down, and finally settled upon a peach-colored lacy, barely there bra and panty set that complemented her deep brown complexion beautifully. Vivian started to panic when she saw the additional mess she was creating. She took a quick check of the time. 33 minutes left. What if he comes early? She shook her hair out while she rummaged through her closet for something suitable to wear. The simple black Diane von Furstenberg wrap dress was calling out her name. It was V-necked, body hugging, perfect. She pulled out the box containing a pair of peach pumps that were a slightly deeper shade of peach than her undergarments. She slipped her feet into the expensive high heels. Wearing nothing but her bra, panties, and her extremely sexy heels, she dug one of her fancy bedspreads from the bottom of her linen closet, changed the sheets, and made the bed. There was no time for a fresh press and curl. She pulled her shoulder-length hair into an updo with a mass of natural curls on top, allowing several playful tendrils to artfully fall in front of her ears and at the nape of her neck. Once she slid into that sexy dress and sprayed her favorite scent behind her ears, under her breast, and on her inner thighs, all of her concerns flew out of the window. She poured herself a glass of red wine to further settle her nerves. Vivian drank it down like it was water and stood before the full-length mirror to look at herself. She looked and felt sensuous, wanton. Her body was pulsing with need. She sent up a quick prayer. Help me, sweet goddess, not to squirm in my seat during dinner. From what she could tell, Samad Hardin was a refined gentleman. The last thing he needed on a first date was a sex-crazed bitch in heat who acted like she wanted to jump his bones before they got a chance to get to know one another. She didn't want to mess this up. Vivian barely had a chance to pick up the clothes on the bedroom floor and throw them in the bottom of the closet, put on a dab of lipstick, and spray some air freshener throughout the house before the doorbell rang. She smiled. Oh my God, he's here. She looked at the clock on the mantelpiece, and he's right on time. Praise be to the goddess. You brought him back to me, she whispered. She rubbed her damp hands on the lower part of her dress and took a deep breath before she went downstairs to open the front door. There he stood in the midst of a gust of stifling heat that battled with the artificially cooled air inside Vivian's house, looking more handsome than a man had a right to be. It was hot outside, but Samad brought a different kind of heat with him. Vivian felt her cheeks heat up in a blush. He didn't say hello. He just stood in the open doorway, his hungry eyes traveling the length of her. Everywhere his dark eyes landed felt like a sensual touch. Any other woman would be frightened by the intensity of his gaze, but not Vivian. She relished his ardent scrutiny, allowing it to warm her all over. She thought he looked amazing. Would you like to come in? She asked. He stepped over the threshold and closed the door behind him. The act of his entering her house took on a special form of symbolism for both of them. Samad was the first man to come into Vivian's house since the split up with Christopher, and Vivian was the first woman Samad had so much as glanced at in far longer than he cared to admit. Samad thought to himself, what is it about this woman that draws me to her like a magnet? He'd been so anxious to see her again that he almost arrived early. Without a doubt, she is beautiful, she's classy, she's smart. But there was something else about her that intrigued him more than her looks. He was curious to find out what that something was. Samad had no way of knowing it, but Vivian was equally intrigued by him. Despite the fact that she knew next to nothing about him, not only was she inviting this compelling man into the sacred place she called home, but she was inviting him into her heart and excited about the prospect of sharing her passion and her secrets with him. You are exquisite, Evelyn-Holland, Samad whispered, and he meant every word. Vivian's answering sigh was better than a verbal thank you. It wrapped itself around his manhood and squeezed like a soft feminine fist. Are those for me? She asked after glancing down at the bouquet of flowers he was holding. Yes, they are, he replied, gently placing the bouquet in her hand. Electricity sparked between them when their fingers briefly touched. She inhaled the bouquet. It was fragrant, sweet. Samad, they are absolutely. He took her in his arms and he kissed her before she could finish the sentence. The bouquet slipped out of Vivian's fingers like leaves in the wind and fell to the floor. Once their lips met, it was like neither of them could get enough of the other's kisses. He cupped her face in his large hands and fed on her mouth like a man starved for sustenance only Vivian could provide. When she sought to get closer, pressing her lush body against his, he broke away from her, panting as if he'd been running for his life, and the only place he could find safe harbor was in her arms. I wanted to do that the very first time I saw you, he confessed in a serious courtroom voice. That is why I acted like such a fool at the pharmacy. Had I stayed another minute, I would have taken you in my arms and fucked you behind the drugstore counter. It was Vivian's turn to cut him off. That is assuming I would have allowed you to fuck me, she interjected playfully. She felt the vibrations from his responding laughter all the way to the tips of her toes. He tipped her chin up, forcing her to look into his eyes. You would have allowed me to do anything I wanted to do, Vivian, he said confidently. Vivian would have been angered by his presumptuous statement had it not been true. He was right. She had felt an immediate connection to him. She probably would have let him take her in the middle of Broad Street at high noon if he wanted to. He whispered, "Let me make love to you right now, right here. Let me show you how I feel," before pulling her back into his arms. Vivian was on sensory overload. Suddenly it felt like his lips and hands were everywhere. Between his words, his touches, and his kisses, she was finding it difficult to think clearly. Finally, she just gave up thinking altogether and allowed herself to just feel. This reading was an excerpt from my second novel entitled The Realm of Awe. My name is C. Evelyn-Holland. Thank you so much for listening, and have a good night.